right, are you ready for some stories this afternoon? Yeah. I'm curious. I'm going to ask this question, and I hope you'll answer it honestly, and I'm not going to make you do anything if you raise your hand, okay? I promise. But how many of you, for how many of you is this your first time to come to tell me a story? Okay? All right? Okay, good. I'm not going to make you do anything, I promise. Okay, well, good. We're glad to continue to have people who come for the first time, and many of you have told stories. Many of you have been here each month that we have done this. Welcome to all of you. We're going to begin this afternoon with the person who has been affiliated with Springmoor for probably the longest of anybody I know, and that would be Phyllis Mayo. Usually we announce which apartment the person lives in. Well, she lives down the street. She lives nearby. And she has been at Springmoor since August of 1984. How about that? Yes. And she's going to come and relate to you the misadventures of bug juice.
Somewhere in the middle of the year 2000, in the summertime, I was going to a cousin's wedding down in Beaufort County, and my sisters and we passed the Volkswagen dealership in Greenville. And I had been thinking I wanted a Volkswagen Beetle. And that day as we passed, I spotted one of those lime green ones sitting on the lot. So on the way back, we stopped and looked at it. And I thought, I want that car. And all the next week, I couldn't get it off my mind. So the following Saturday, or it might even been a Friday, maybe I took Friday off, my friend Hannah Hills, who lived here at the time, and I went down to Greenville, and I bought that car. And it was the 2000 Beetle, lime green, sunroof, leather interior, just the hottest little thing I could ever imagine. And we drove back to Raleigh and giggled all the way about how green that car was. Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. When it came time for me to get my license plates, I decided to get a vanity plate, and I named it Bug Juice. Well, you see, it's not spelled correctly, and that's because someone else in North Carolina already had the plate with a C right here instead of an S. So I became the owner of this license plate, Bug Juice with an S. That October, Hannah and I decided that we would take a trip to the Outer Banks. I think it was around the time of my birthday, and it had turned cold in late October, and so we took off, and we arrived in Belhaven about dinner time on the night that we were traveling, and went to the bed and breakfast where we were supposed to be staying. And she stayed in the car while I went to kind of introduce myself and check in. And when I got to the door, there was a lady and another lady sitting in like a sunroom having coffee or something. And I knocked on the door, and the lady looked at me rather peculiarly, and I said, we have a reservation. And she said, oh, well, I've closed the bed and breakfast. Well, and this was Belhaven, and there aren't hotels on every corner. And I said, well, where are we going to stay? And so she got on the phone and found a lady out in the hunting grounds around there who hosted hunters that would come and spend the night. And that lady happened to have a room. So we found our way out into the country and found this lady's nice little brick house, and she somehow scraped together some dinner for us and was very gracious. And so we had a comfortable night. We got up early the next morning and went to the ferry at Swan Quarter. Had to be there at like 7 or 7:30. And we got on the ferry, and we're having a really nice time. We parked the car, we got out of the car, and we walked around and enjoyed the water, and we're just having a nice time. And about 30 minutes before we knew we were going to come into Ocracoke, we decided that we should go inside in the ferry and go to the bathroom. And Hannah was walking at that time with a walker. And I was a little nervous. I didn't want her to fall. And so I was trying to hold on to her. And about the time we went inside, the ferry began to turn so that the water was different underneath the boat. And the boat began to do this a little bit. And so we got inside the bathroom safely. Well, she was trying to hold onto her walker, and I was trying to just hold on. And I said, well, you hold on to the walker and I'll pull your pants down. And it was really windy on the ferry, and we were both dressed in sweaters and heavy coats, and we had on hats or hoods or whatever. Our heads were covered up. Well, as I got in the middle of pulling her pants down, I began to feel myself just turning green. It was pretty bad. So I got her down and I said, you sit, I have to get outside where I can see the horizon, because the windows were frosted. There were windows, but they were frosted in that little house where on the ferry where the restrooms were. So I went outside and I kind of got my balance again and got myself back together. And so we made it. We got back out of the bathroom and got back to the car, and we got off the ferry. And so we got to Ocracoke. It was my first time on that part of the Outer Banks. I had been to Manteo and the upper end, but I'd never been down to Ocracoke. And as I said, it was late October, and a lot of businesses were closed, and there was one restaurant that was open, and everybody who got off the ferry seemingly went to that restaurant and was standing in line by the time we got there. So we gave up on that and found a grocery store and got some bread and some sandwich makings and ate in the car. So far not an ideal trip, but we've had fun. Well, as I said, it was my first time to that part of the Outer Banks. So as we were driving along, we saw a pony pen over on the left, and we took a little whirl around in the pony pen, didn't get out of the car, and just took a little look, and we started up Highway 12. And I thought, I want to see the ocean. So we were riding along, and there was a car that was stopped on the side of the road, and maybe 50 feet back, and I thought, I'm going to pull over here and get out and go look at the ocean. Well, I pulled over, whoomph, right down in the sand. I thought, uh-oh, and we looked at each other like, well, it was early in the afternoon, so it wasn't getting dark or anything. That was good, but otherwise it was not good. So we looked at each other, and it was like, what are we going to do? So I knew better than to try to get out, but I did try the reverse forward, and I could feel that the car was not going to go anywhere. And after a while, some young men came along, and they got behind the car and in front of the car, and they were rocking me back and forth and trying to get out, and I could hear that sand just flying up under my car. Well, when we'd stopped at the pony pen, I had seen a tow truck. So I said to someone, would you get in touch with that tow company and have them come and help us get out? Well, we waited, and several people stopped along. Can we help you? And we said, no, we're waiting for the tow truck. Well, the tow truck never came, but a man came in a great big white pickup truck, brand new, and it had a winch on the back, and he hooked it to the front of the car, and in no time he just pulled us out. Now, I was only that far from the road, just off the road, but he pulled us out. He went on his way. So we were out of the sand. Well, I got in I was in the driver's seat. We got up on the road, and the steering wheel was doing this, just shaking back and forth. I mean, it was just making me shake all over. It was doing so hard, and I'm thinking, I have ruined my car. We were not very far from the ferry that goes to Hatteras. So when we got there and we got in line, we had to wait for the ferry for a little while. So I went into the ferry house, the house there where the people are that run the ferry, and I said, can you tell me where a mechanic is? And he said, there's one just as you get off the ferry at Hatteras. So I said, okay, I'll have to stop there, and I know I'm going to have to pay a fortune to get this car fixed. But while we were in line, waiting for the ferry, I just put the car in park, and I just gunned the engine, put it in park, run, 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 like that, and just did it over and over again. And we got on the ferry, and we got off on the other side. Everything was fine. The car was fine. And we looked at each other and we said, if anything else goes wrong today, we're going straight home. nothing else went wrong, and we had a good rest of the trip.
Thank you, Phyllis. You know, she bought a little red bug that she had for a little while. And why not? It's my opportunity to tell on you. So maybe she'll tell us some of her red bug experiences on another occasion. Our next storyteller is Bob Gardner. Bob came and told us part one of the story of Betty's poetry, his wife, who died a little over a year ago now, isn't it, Bob? That she died in July of 2012. So he wanted to come and give us part two, I guess, of Betty's poetry. Part two of Love Poems and Letters, the rest of the story. Bob?
As Beth said, sometimes a few weeks ago I had read from Betty's book of poetry, Love Letters, and at that time I explained that I found her book of poems in a little black box and a small notebook when we was going through her papers after her death. I knew she had written some poems, but I didn't know how many. I think she wrote most of them for her own enjoyment. But I read from some of those poems before. I read about a poem that she wrote when she was a senior in high school. She was age 16. She was a senior at Bragtown High School in Durham, but they only had 11th grades back then, and she wrote a poem about her faith. And then I read about some of her all of her earlier poems, one of which I want to read just briefly from today, about heartbreaks, high school heartbreaks. Now, this was a poem that was written in 1943, and at that time, you know, World War II was going on, and she refers to some of those old songs during the war, and also about rationing and so forth. High school heartbreaks. Doesn't it seem odd to you that it doesn't mean a thing to you when we meet by chance, except the remembrance of an old romance? A faint remembrance of an old tune, an old Chevrolet, a full moon, my prayer and all the things you are, Forest Hills and 8 in a car. Of serious talks while holding hands, piccolos and hot string bands, ganging out and listening for the train, a sophomore party in the rain. She wrote about poems about the USO. I met Betty at USO in Durham in 1945. I was in the Navy V-12 and NRC program at Duke, and she was a hostess at the USO in Durham. This is a picture that was made during that period of time. Belt's store in Durham made the pictures for the USO, and that was in 1943. It's stamped on the back. She wrote about our courtship, and I want to read just a couple of verses from it. Building a dream. Hammers and nails are ordinary tools, the ones recognized by the world. Implements that villages of houses and schools from the mighty forests unfurl. In building a dream, the tools are not made in a factory or stove from the store. They come from the heart, and the plans are laid on the soul's indelible floor. I want to be there at the end of the day if the dream's progress seems too slow, to help mend the seams of your tired bound way, mend the seams of your man's tired way and tell you I love you so. Well, I just read a couple of the verses. It's longer than that, but because of time, they are favorite poems from that period of time, a period of time when she wrote about other loves before my time, made her heart sad and blue. And now for the rest of the story. Well, as I did want to mention, I covered about our honeymoon in 1947 when we went up to the Hotel Chamberlain in Virginia Beach. And then that's as far as I got at that particular section one of it. Now for the rest of the story. Following our honeymoon, we returned to Durham, and I started law school in 1947, and she went back to being secretary there at the Washington Duke Hotel for the manager. Soon after graduation from law school, I was called back into service in the Korean War by the Navy in November 1950. These were particularly difficult years for Betty. Betty came out to California, where I was stationed, and she wrote this poem while there, waiting for our first baby to be born. Lady in waiting. Lady in waiting while in away time, frivolously occupied, dreaming up rhyme, awaiting the return of a Lieutenant J.G. and the arrival of a new little captain to be. Fiddling up minutes with oh, this and that, reading and writing and coffee and chat, walking to get tired enough to come home to sleep in a bed for two, all alone. Lady in waiting for oh, such a lot, a sailor she loves and a tiny wee tot. Of course, as I was getting ready, waiting for the baby to arrive, I wrote the doctor and told him that I just wanted to let him know that it was my wish to spare nothing that would be aid and a comfort to Betty, and if complication did arise, to do what was necessary to save her. Carl was born in California then on Friday, April the 13th, 1951. Afterwards, I brought Betty and Carl back home to Durham before going to Korea. Nancy Weaver, who was a neighbor's daughter, stayed with her many nights and was a great comfort for Betty. And Betty loved her dearly. Then when I got overseas, I wrote what they call a do not open letter to Betty just in case something happened. Back home again. I returned from Korea in December 1952 and began civilian life with Home Security and then Nationwide Insurance, where I worked for over 35 years, first as an adjuster in Charlotte and then later as regional claims attorney for Nationwide here in Raleigh. In the meantime, we raised 5 children, all of whom graduated from college and established homes of their own. I was born on a Christmas day, and in 1959, that's sometime after I was back, she wrote this birthday poem to me. Happy birthday to my love. Beneath the season's red and greens, I'd like to give to you a little package of my love wrapped in pink and blue. A birthday wish for you alone from the world of you and me. May you be happy, healthy, wise in the years that are yet to be. As I think I mentioned, we had 5 children. Ellen Schwartz, one of my twins, my youngest children too, were twins, and they were, she has a brother, Kevin, and then they have three other children. My oldest son is out, teaches at Arizona State in Phoenix. Shannon teaches over in Winston-Salem, and Angela teaches up in Upper Montclair, New Jersey. Well, you can imagine it was a kind of a busy time for Betty during those years, and I can, well, think back when you was raising your family and how it went. Although Betty was no soccer mom because we didn't know what soccer was back then, she was busy, and she describes the life of a mother of five. The hectic life. My library books are overdue, my pen is out of ink. I had a flat tire at nursery school. There are tea stains in the sink. The hot water lasts till supper time, and then my darling daughters take their baths and wash their heads in brown and ice cold water. The television, dark at night. The twins just had a fight. Well, you can relate to her experiences, I think. These poems, of course, as you gather, it's not about me, it's about Betty, and her poems is a story. And then as the children left home, you know, an empty nest, I'm sure you remember when your children left home too. And Betty wrote about the empty nest. Who am I? No baths, no bottles, no midnight feedings, no carpools, no Cub Scouts, no remedial readings, no breakfast to cook, no cookies, no lunches to fix, no formulas to buy, no cookies to mix. I'm at a loss to know my position, my goal, my job, my daily ambition. Would I have them return, these days of the past? No, but they were great, I know that at last. Of course, over the years, I guess we had some disagreements, just like most of us. And it's on one such occasion that Betty sent me this Valentine note. We don't always see eye to eye, in fact, we seldom do. But we mostly see heart to heart, and that's why I love you. And sometime in this period of time, she sent me a Father's Day card by an unknown author. She built me up and then she kind of put me down, you'll see. To my husband, lots of women marry a guy and then try to change him, but not me. I love you just the way you are, but don't get any worse. Happy Father's Day. Nationwide gave us a retirement party in 1991 at the North Raleigh Hilton, and I was roasted in front of a rather large group and received a notebook filled with cards and letters, and also that notebook contained a letter from President Jimmy Carter. And I received a picture by Bob Timberlake. Now, the way that letter from Jimmy Carter came about was one of the people there in the office wrote him a request to send me a retirement note, because I certainly didn't know him, although my brother knew him down at Emory, but I didn't know him. And so he sent me a letter about my retirement. In 1997, the children gave us a dinner at the Angus Barn in celebration of our golden wedding day. We moved to Springmore on January the 13th, 2012, out of concern for our children just as much as for ourselves. Moving after 51 years from the house there on Dalewood Drive in Raleigh was not easy, it was rather difficult, but we never looked back. Betty died on July the 14th, 2012, 64 years, 10 months, and 28 days after our wedding. My sister wrote a poem as she spoke of the loss of a loved one that she knew. Enough. I ask no longer why you had to die. You lived. That is enough. Betty was my wife and partner, mother of our children, and beloved grandmother and friend. We find comfort in the love of family and friends and the memories of a life well lived, and that she returned to the Creator from which she came. I'm glad I was with her till death did us part. Last year, Kevin and Cindy, her twin brother and his wife, took me back to Duke's Chapel Methodist Church there in Durham, which is located on the old Oxford Highway. This church was the one that was originally founded by the Duke family. And so I hadn't been back for a while. On Sunday, September the 9th, 2012, Kevin and Cindy took me to homecoming at Duke's Chapel Church, where we were married 65 years ago. Although I wanted to go back at least one more time, I was somewhat apprehensive as the day approached, since it would be very emotional. We went anyway. Duke's Chapel Church is a beautiful country church founded by the Duke family. There were only a few people that we knew, of course, from days when we were members 65 years ago, but there were 2 or 3. And then, of course, we knew several of the children of members that we knew. I was pleasantly surprised to see Nancy Weaver, the young neighbor's daughter that stayed with Betty while I was overseas in Korea. The guest minister preached a good sermon, followed by dinner on the grounds. Plenty of delicious food to eat. We had time to renew acquaintances and make new friends. My return to this church was emotional as it brought back memories of our wedding day 65 years ago. I am so glad that I went back, and maybe I'll go back again. And we did go back this past September to another reunion. Thank you.
Bob, we appreciate very much you giving us this glimpse into Betty. We didn't get to know her very well because many of us didn't, because you all had not lived here very long, but thank you very much for that. Yes. Morris, it's your turn now. Morris Gordon is going to come and tell us a story called Coincidence.
Well, can you all hear me? Anybody? Okay. This story starts in the middle of Florida at Camp Blanding, which was the last place I came to in the Army after the war. Before I left the Camp Blanding, I bought a second or third hand Ford. I don't know how much many had occupied it before, but I'd never driven before. So one of the staff taught me how to drive informally. So I was confident enough to drive after I got out of the Army, down to South Florida. I wanted to do some exploring before I went home to New York. Albany, New York. Not New York, Albany, New York. That's different. So I drove down to Key Largo, which is the largest island on the Key, on the far eastern end. Wanting to go to Key West, which was not famous by Ernest Hemingway at that time. In fact, there's a string of islands between the two. They're uninhabited. They're just primitive roads with trees on both sides, except that the bridges were paved, and you could stop on the bridges, go over the edge, and see all the skates and rays and whales and everything in the ocean. That was a good one. And we got to Key West with a problem and did this exploring. And then on the way back on this long road, I stood about the middle of one of the islands. I heard a pig under the car, under his foot. I didn't know what I got under the foot. So I decided to wait until I got back to civilization. But there was a truck in the middle of the road, blocking the road for us about halfway back. And that was lucky because two guys were driving, he came in, helped me lift up the hood, and sure enough, the fan belt was broken. Just before I left the Camp Landing, one of the sergeants said that you have an old car, you must buy a new fan belt. So I had one in the truck, and they helped me put it together. But it knocked loose with a flap and big pig, knocked loose all the water pipes. So here I was, dry, good fan belt. Not to worry, the truck was carrying a 5-gallon can full of water. So the 7 foot filled my tanks, and I was all set, except the truck was still there. Said, oh, by the way, we're stuck. We have a crack in the engine block, and the solder won't work, and we need a push. So I took the little car and pushed it in the back of the truck, just nudged it, started up, and they went on, and both of us went on. I never had any more trouble. And I got back to Key Largo, I got in New York. In fact, I drive to Albany, New York. One stop, which was at Durham, North Carolina, I signed up for the full term at Duke. I came back later. That's a story in itself, I'll tell you something. Excuse me. But the main coincidence was the truck and the car helping each other, and both of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonidas. Our final story today is brought to us by Mary Cates. Phyllis has been encouraging Mary to come and tell us a story, right? And you decided you were going to today. Please come, Mary. Mary and her husband David is here on the front row. I lost my cheat sheet, so David, we're glad to have you with us today as well. All right. What did we decide about the microphone the other day?
I'll
How
just
did
ask
with it?
people to raise their hand if they can't hear me.
Okay, all right. A little bit lower. Right there?
And if Phyllis wants you to tell a story, you might as well go ahead and do it. My mother and grandmother probably would turn over in their graves more than a few times as they witnessed how the world was changing and how I was living my life. With great respect for both of them, I'm quite sure that they shook their heads and declared they didn't understand me at all. How could I be one of their offsprings? That I had spoiled my good name by getting into politics. Indeed, I had gotten out of my place altogether. I can hear them saying now some of the words they used to say. Fools rush in where angels fear to tread. Fools' names are like their faces, always seen in public places. And in general, passing on what had been passed on to them. That they live in such a way that their neighbors respect them. You work hard to pay your own way and help those in need. These were and still are good rules and may have been enough for life back then. I went through school afraid to get out of line for fear of what the neighbors might think. I started to work as a secretary. My choices were a school teacher, nurse, or secretary. I was married after the war, the big one, and continued to work until my husband received a PhD and we had children. My world and the world around me began to change, and the basic tenets that my mother lived by didn't go far enough to meet the challenges that I began to see. Religion played a bigger part in shaping these challenges than I realized. The church was saying, don't hide your light under a bushel. You have but one life. You too can walk in water, do the impossible, if you keep your eyes on what is good. We are stewards of this world the short time we are here. The struggle for me was how to deal with these messages, these challenges. To get into the mainstream of life, I would be going beyond and sometimes contrary to what I had learned from my mother, grandmother, and other women I knew at the time. And certainly I would be getting outside the comfort zone I had with my family and friends. But if I didn't act on my sensitivity, would I lose it? If I didn't use my intelligence to help identify and solve problems that I saw, would my intelligence be dulled? Do we indeed have a responsibility to try to make this world better? I'm sure you agree that we do. But how do we go about this? Here's what I found myself doing. I would talk to my husband. I would tell him about the problem or opportunity and hope as a male he would decide to do something about it. It took me a while to realize he had his own problems, and often when I discussed my concerns, he was preoccupied with his agenda or was trying to relax, not take on more problems. Next, I tried a bigger audience, the Bridge Club. Looking back, I suppose I expected to have my thinking validated, to hear that my concerns were legitimate, and to get encouragement from them to act on my convictions. Usually what I heard was, it's your turn to bid. Obviously, I had to find people who shared my concerns and a so-called support group. The late 60s and 70s brought the environmental issues into our living rooms. Ecology became a household word. I joined all kinds of groups. A group to save Umstead Park from a proposed airport runway, the League of Women Voters, citizens advisory groups, city commissions and committees, etc. Generally becoming a member of the chorus for all quality of life issues. I was a member of the chorus as leaders changed or burned out. Sometimes I was singing the loudest and singing alone. Finally, it became more work to get and keep the leader working than to do the work myself. Most of you have experienced this, I am sure. Yet I doubted my skills as a leader. Still, I had the old fear of what the neighbors would think, and in general didn't have my goals sorted out well enough to get a clear direction or adequate motivation. And I needed more confidence in myself to get out front. I had not realized that my conditioning as a woman to a subservient role was getting in the way. The revolution of the 60s said a lot to me. Among other things, it said there should be no second-class citizens, that our democratic country could not survive without full participation from all of its citizens, regardless of race, sex, religion, economics, IQ, or appearance. It said you are important because you are a unique person. There is no one else like you. It said, believe in the art of the possible. You can make a difference. It all ties back in with the biblical messages. Use your God-given talents. Let your light shine. Do that which is good for the world. There were stones in the harbor for me that I had to work loose in making a change in my life. Two basic things helped me to move out of my comfort zone. One was reevaluation. Counseling helped me to recognize and evaluate my assets and to come to terms with my liabilities, to think more positively about myself and others, that we all are worthwhile human beings. And the second thing was a little book called How to Get Control of the Time in Your Life by Alan Lakin. This gets into goal setting. I gave a book club program on this book some years ago and found few women in the room had thought in terms of personal goals. This book suggests a written exercise. Make a list of what you would choose to do if you had only 6 months to live, a year or 5 years. Do you want a better job? Do you want to go to Europe? Do you want to run for political office? Then what is it you need to do to accomplish your goal? Cross off anything you're not willing to spend at least 5 minutes a day on. This may mean you get up 5 minutes earlier or go to bed 5 minutes later. This gets you into time management strategies. When I inventoried my talents and experiences, I knew I had been too long singing in the chorus, working behind the scenes, trying to get the job done, and trying to influence others who had the vote. With reevaluation of my personal skills, with goal setting and with time management, I decided that I could be one of the decision makers with the vote. I ran for the city council against an incumbent, won the first time I tried, was reelected the second time with 77% of the vote, and so on for 5 terms, thanks to the support of my family, friends, and ladies from the Bridge Club. If indeed my mother and grandmother could see how I lived my life, I like to think they're pleased and applauded to see that women now can risk being the fool instead of the angel floating above life. I like to think that my change came in time for me to make a real contribution to the community and its citizens. I even hope that I was a role model to others. I am pleased that I had the courage to get out of my place and act on my sensitivity and intelligence. P.S. I found along the way the neighbors weren't actually thinking about me. Thank you.
Okay, let me finish this up. Mary, thank you. Thank you for, you have indeed had an impact on the city of Raleigh and on this community. And thank you for your courage, not only today, but when you realized the need to step out of that comfort zone. And thank you very much. Yes.
That's what I wanted to say.
You wanted to say that. Okay. You want to say it?
I want to say Mary was on the city council for 14 years. And my husband was city manager part of that time. And she was great. And I know what I'm talking about.
Pat Zachary is giving testimony to Mary's work on the city council. Thank you. Thank you, Pat. Yes, Dot.
I might want to point out, though, some people might not know that she is the responsible person for Oklahoma median on Creedmoor Road. They were going to just take it over flat, and she fought hard for that. That's just one of the many issues she did.
Let me repeat what Dot said in case I didn't know that, Dot, that Mary's hard work and speaking up is the reason there is a median in Creedmoor Road with lovely plants along that and the grass along there too. Okay? Anybody else want to say a word? We thank you for coming this afternoon. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Morris. Bob, we appreciate your being here to tell a story. Phyllis, thank you for telling us about the misadventures of Bug Juice. There is yet stories to be told. And we love it best when you come to us with your stories. But we have been known to come and get you if we know you've got a story. So it's your choice. Thank you very much for being here this afternoon.